Greetings, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Reading Epic Threads. I'm your host, Patrick Gunnels, joining you from Houston, Texas, this March 9th, 2025 at 8:11 a.m. Central Daylight Time. Oh, what a time to be alive that we're going to have we have 4 months of standard time, which aligns pretty well with circadian rhythms, and we get aggressively jolted into daylight time, which does not. Now, I know those of you who live in the tundra would like to see it get dark at 5:40 instead of 4:40. But as my friend Anne Rain will tell us, standard time has been shown to be superior in a number of different ways. It's very obviously correct. Don't argue with me. Standard time is better. So, when all of the dirtbags start proposing, let's make daylight time permanent, just be aware that that is a circadian trap. And with that, my dear friends, I want to make a little bit of an announcement. Epic Moisture Creamy Body Butter is an amazing product. It consists of 3 really important butters. Those butters are kokum butter, shea butter, and mango butter, all refined organic. It also contains babasu oil, which is very similar to coconut oil, except it's like coconut oil in that it is solid at room temperature. It is more non-comedogenic than coconut oil. And then we add apricot kernel oil, amaranth oil, argan oil, vitamin E oil, and then let's see, am I missing any? Oh, that's it. Okay, that's the entire recipe for Epic Moisture Creamy Body Butter. And one of the things that I love about it is that it does not contain anything else other than things that are great for your skin. Every single other body butter that you can find, unless you go to some craft shop or do it yourself, is going to contain some form of cetearyl alcohol, which is a wax. Now, let me tell you something. That wax, it can clog your pores. It can have bad effects. Now, are those effects catastrophic? Absolutely not. However, if you want a truly natural product that is nothing but good stuff for your skin, you can get Epic Moisture Creamy Body Butter. Now, I'm going to go on a little bit more because this is the most temperature-sensitive product ever. If this stuff melts, you have to get it fully melted and then put it in the freezer and rapid cool it so all of the butters rapidly cool at roughly the same time because they have different melting points, which means different solidification points. If they melt at different rates in room temperature, the kokum butter solidifies first, and it becomes these little grainy beads of kokum butter, which isn't bad for you or anything. It just doesn't feel right. It changes the experience. The long story short is, if I don't send these bad boys out in the months of March and April, then these bad boys are not all going to arrive in the condition I want them to be in, and it's going to harm the customer experience. My point is this. You got until the end of April. We are doing a blowout on Epic Moisture Creamy Body Butter. We're going to sell it all. And then during the summer, the only place you can buy Epic Moisture is going to be right here, in person, retail. Letting you know that now, get your creamy body butter while it lasts, and then we will start selling it again probably in freaking October, guys, because Houston is blazing hot. Go to tulipblooms.shop. Use promo code Shapiro for 10% off. Time is ticking. Tulipblooms.shop, promo code Shapiro. All right. And without further ado, the latest from the Root Bitch. Expand Your Thinking 3. From uic.edu. The Forgotten Municipal Bonds. School districts. When it comes to municipal bonds, most of the public, as well as researchers and academics, usually think of debt issued by states, cities, and large municipal infrastructure entities like airports and municipal utilities. Fewer think of school district bonds. They should. According to 2022 audit data compiled by Merit Research Services and Investor Tools Company, the total dollar amount of direct debt outstanding by primary and secondary school districts is approximately $450 billion, which is second only to the $600 billion owed by states and territories among all municipal bond credit sectors. There are more than 13,000 school districts in the nation, of which about 4,000 are currently estimated to have debt outstanding. More than likely, the most important reason that school district municipal bond stories do not grab the national public finance headlines or dominate analytical commentary when municipal bond risk or trends are discussed is because of the sector's historically low default rate since the Great Depression. With exceptions, school districts are highly secured by a general obligation security pledge backed in the first instance by property taxes. Also, many states provide safety valve protection or oversight that enhances the pledge security and reduces risk. There is another good reason that helps explain why the school district sector does not get the attention it deserves. Many different school districts, notwithstanding their size, are far from the public eye, except for the families who use the schools themselves. Isleta Independent School District, Texas, is hardly a household name nationally, yet it's $1 billion in outstanding debt is a little more than the total debt for Portland, Oregon. From WeGoRepublic.com, how do school bonds work? Likened to a home mortgage, a voter-approved school bond allows a school district to borrow funds. The Board of Trustees authorizes bond elections, and state law grants the board the authority to sell bonds. How are Texas schools funded? A school district's tax rate consists of two parts: A, maintenance and operations, M&O, which funds the general operating fund, which pays for salaries, supplies, utilities, insurance, equipment, and other costs of day-to-day operations, and B, debt service, interest and sinking, or I&S, which can be used for a variety of special purposes, assuming voter approval. For example, they may finance facility construction and renovation projects, acquire land, or purchase capital equipment such as technology, and vehicles such as buses. Where does the I&S money come from? From school bonds. Likened to a home mortgage, a voter-approved school bond allows a school district to borrow funds. The Board of Trustees authorizes bond elections, and Texas law grants the board the authority to sell bonds. Prior to any bond vote, a volunteer citizen committee is usually created to develop a bond package for presentation to the Board of Trustees. The board approves the bond package, the specific uses of bond monies, and the estimated costs for each project included in the bond. After voter approval, the school district can sell bonds to investors who are repaid their principal plus interest. Payout is limited by law to 40 years. The district sells bonds that mature at different times, so bond expenditures for items with a shorter lifespan are paid off before the purchase becomes obsolete. This also allows the district to capture the lowest interest rates available. Why is bonding a good idea? As state agencies, school districts rely on M&O to pay for the education of the state's children. Bonds allow for districts to spread the cost of expensive projects across time without affecting the district's normal educational operations. Also, bond funds all stay with the district, and they are not subject to state recapture fluctuations in revenue due to state mandates or other negative economic influences. In short, bonds save and protect taxpayers while allowing for essential ongoing facilities development and other capital expenses to be funded. Note that the definition of essential is in the mind of the voter. How do bonds work? Voters approve a specific dollar amount or the maximum amount the district is allowed to sell without another election. The school district may then sell their bonds as municipal bonds, when funds are needed for capital projects, usually once or twice a year. The interest rate paid is based on the district's bond rating and the interest rates in effect at the time of sale. Districts benefit if they have a higher bond rating, meaning a lower interest could be charged. Principal and interest on the bonds are repaid over an extended period with funds from the debt service tax rate, source TASB. Thus, there are two parts to any bond process. One, bond authorization that specifies the amount of bonds the district is authorized by the voters to sell, and two, bond sales that may occur over a period of time with the date and amount of each sale determined by the board on an as-needed basis. Note that a district is not obligated to spend all the authorized monies, but cannot exceed the authorization. Can a school district use bond dollars for things not explicitly voted upon? Yes, if, and that is a big if, the district can reallocate bond savings from a given project to another project if, one, the specified project is completed satisfactorily, two, the new project fits into the bond language, three, the board approves the allocation. For example, with board approval, funds for renovation for School A could be used for School B, assuming the first school's project is done, but not for buying a new school bus. Again, reallocating bond funds can save money in the long run, reward efficiencies, and upgrade the district. How has the legislature changed the language we see on a ballot? During the 86th legislative session, 2019, the governor signed a bill that added language school district must include on every bond package taken to the voters. This is a property tax increase. These 6 words in capital letters are now required on all school bond election ballots, regardless of whether the bond will or will not actually increase property taxes. Those favoring this language argue that it promotes transparency, voter awareness, and a differentiation from other items on a ballot. Opponents of the inclusion of that warning maintain that the words are not always accurate, are misleading. Taxes are determined both by tax rates and appraisals, and are emotional deterrents to support essential needs. From Forbes. Yes. No. Tax increase bonds increase your taxes. It's spring election season, and across the country, citizens will be heading to the polls to vote in municipal elections. In my community, in addition to trying to narrow down a field of mayoral candidates and electing school board members, we will also vote on what is being billed as a no tax increase bond issuance for our local school district. Like many terms in politics, putting no tax increase in front of bonds is supposed to blunt the opposition to new taxes. But let's be clear, there is no special category of bonds that school districts issue that doesn't increase your taxes. No tax increase bonds increase your taxes. How? School districts regularly issue bonds to finance capital improvements like building new buildings or renovating existing infrastructure. Taxpayers pay off those bonds over time, usually via an increase to their property taxes. Bonds are issued for a specific period, and when they are paid off, taxpayers' tax bills go down. Enter no tax increase bonds. When a school district finds itself on the tail end of a bond payoff period, it realizes that it can borrow more money without taxpayers paying more than they currently are. They simply tack more bonds on and add more years of payment. Everyone's taxes stay the same, and the school district gets more money. But do you see the problem? No tax increase bonds actually do increase your taxes. If the district didn't issue new bonds after paying off the existing ones, your tax bill would go down, but it doesn't. That is a tax increase. I understand that this might seem a trivial matter, but it is a problem for 3 reasons. First, it's dishonest. Honesty is in short supply in contemporary politics, but our school leaders should be better than this. If they want more money for a new high school, a new science lab, or a new football stadium, they have an obligation to be transparent with the people they're asking to pay for it. Playing a shell game or deflecting the true cost erodes the trust between the community and schools. Second, it thwarts oversight, transparency, and accountability. School district bond elections have the potential to be some of the clearest and most transparent elections we have in America. But when districts are simply tacking on more years of spending, they often use general language about the allowable uses of these dollars. There are no clear plans. It's hiding the ball. Finally, it undermines the fundamental truth that the things that we want cost money. We need to pay for it out of our taxes. If it is worth it, we should do it. But we should do so knowing that we are going to be paying for it.
Truth to the idea that they're going to pay it off, and the proof of that is, do you know that bonds on the vast majority of the school districts go up anywhere between 15 and 30% per year? Well, that statement in and of itself proves the fraud has been going on at least since 2006. They're lying straight up, and the amount of damage that they've done economically, if you look at your house, do you know that the bond value, outstanding fraudulent bond value on the average house is in excess of 50%? And we'll get into that shortly.
Yeah, we're going to show you guys a few counties that are absolutely out of control, and we're going to show you how much it actually costs per student to go to school. In some of these counties, it's more expensive for these students to go to school than them going to Harvard University. But I wanted to recap the root of the problem. Remember, you guys, the root of the problem is within our property taxes, and these taxing entities and these jurisdictions overvaluing our house, taking that money and fraudulently spending it in the system. And here's the thing, and I'm going to tell you guys point blank, this is what they're doing. This is the root, okay? They're using our children as propaganda. Anyone that thinks that there's a problem is usually villainized, and people make comments like, oh, well, then how are the children supposed to learn and things like that? Well, they're not supposed to learn by committing fraud. And if you look at the actually academics, it's all going down. You guys, I'm going to say this one more time before we go and dig deep into the problem here again. They're using our children, including mine, as propaganda to continue this fraud. The school system and the education department is the biggest Ponzi scheme in the world. We've proven that with math. Now, let's go to the second segment. And I want to show you guys with visualization the reality of the problem. I've highlighted 3 different ISDs, and what this chart and what this Excel spreadsheet is showing is it's essentially comparing the total debt outstanding of bonds compared to what the population is and what the student body is in those counties. And you guys, the results of this is absolutely shocking.
From fee.org, the primacy of property rights and the American founding. Because Americans understood the right to property as part and parcel of the right to liberty, they viewed taxation without representation, a violation of their economic freedom, as an attack on the whole of their freedom. The Stamp Act Congress, called to protest the first of those taxes, declared that, quote, "It is inseparably essential to the freedom of a people that no taxes should be imposed on them but with their own consent," end quote. In a similar vein, Jefferson wrote, quote, "Still less let it be proposed that our properties within our own territories shall be taxed or regulated by any power on earth but our own. The God who gave us life, gave us liberty at the same time. The hand of force may destroy, but cannot disjoin them," end quote. In fact, American authors continually insisted that such taxation, however small the amount on principle, was tantamount to slavery. As one patriot, Silas Downer, affirmed, if the colonists yielded to the tax power of the British Parliament, this would place them, quote, "in the lowest bottom of slavery." He continued, "For if they can take away 1 penny from us against our wills, they can take all. If they have such power over our properties, they must have a proportionable power over our persons, and from hence it will follow that they can demand and take away our lives, whensoever it shall be agreeable to their sovereign wills and pleasure," end quote. To make a claim on the economic liberty of individuals or their community is to make a claim on their entire freedom. In the end, no real distinction could rightfully be made between personal and economic liberty. Accordingly, the founders understood unjust taxation as not merely a financial or economic issue, but an issue with implications for the whole of human liberty. Not only did the founders affirm that property rights were as important as other personal rights, at times they insisted that property rights represented the most important of rights. In Federalist 10, James Madison wrote that the protection of, quote, the faculties of men from which the rights of property originate is the first object of government, end quote. In what way did the founders understand the protection of the acquiring faculties to be the first function of government? Contrary to the assertions of authors such as Richard Hofstadter, it was not because they believed that acquiring property was the main or most important human activity. Men who willingly risked their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor for the sake of their country's freedom were obviously not the type who considered the accumulation of material goods to be the end of human existence. On one hand, a foreign faction, the British Parliament, had begun its encroachment on colonial rights with an assertion of taxation power over the property of the colonists. On the other hand, after independence, Americans saw that a domestic faction, namely a passionate majority operating in state legislatures, could also threaten individual rights, and the first right to be undermined was the right to property through the pursuit of deliberately inflationary policies and the cancellation of private debts. From such experience, Madison and other leaders learned that statesmen should view property as the most important right because it is most often the first object of a faction's hostility. Because of the relative vulnerability, property rights were afforded the most extensive guarantees in the Constitution. Among the specific limitations placed on congressional power in Article 1, most, either directly or indirectly, were designed to protect property rights. These included the restrictions on direct taxes, the ban on export duties, the prohibition on preferential treatment of different ports, and the ban on taxation of interstate commerce. These guarantees were later supplemented by the Fifth Amendment's Due Process Clause and the ban on the national governments taking property without just compensation, later made applicable to state governments by the 14th Amendment. According to the founders, property was not only a right in itself, but also a means to the preservation of other rights. Economic freedom was understood to serve the other personal freedoms in two ways. First, property meant practical power, and economically independent people were best able to maintain their political independence. Indeed, the ownership of property was of immense importance to the practical independence not only of the people as a whole, but also of the individual citizen. It was because the founders understood property rights to be absolutely essential to Republican virtue that many of them favored restricting the suffrage to property holders. One will look in vain for any statement by the leaders of that generation claiming that those without property were inferior in their unalienable rights or their fundamental human dignity. What many, not all, of the founders did believe, rightly or wrongly, was that a state in which the privilege of voting was restricted to property holders was the best means to ensure a government that protected the basic rights of all, rich and poor. At the Constitutional Convention, John Dickinson spoke for many present in arguing that freeholders or landowners, who constituted the vast majority of the people, were the best guardians of liberty. Those without property were thought to be far too dependent on those with it to be able to exercise an independent vote. Gouverneur Morris argued, quote, "Give the votes to people who have no property, and they will sell them to the rich, who will be able to buy them. The man who does not give his vote freely is not represented. It is the man who dictates the vote." Although ultimately the convention decided not to establish national requirements for the suffrage and left it to the discretion of state governments, the sentiments expressed during the convention debates show why many states retained property qualifications for voting. For many leaders understood a property-holding citizenry to be the best guardians of freedom.
Remember, property taxes violate the First, Fifth, 14th, and 16th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. And so, let's start today's video with some action. As you guys see on the screen, this is the filed criminal complaint that Mitch Wexler has just sent off to the Department of Justice. But before we go into this, Mitch, can you give the viewers a quick update on the status of the bill to end property taxes in the state of Texas? What's the status on that right now?
The bill, I just found out a few minutes ago, is actually in the legal department. And with a little bit of luck, it'll be handed back on Monday or Tuesday to me so that I can just double check and make sure that whatever was changed is as intended. They obviously have their own legal requirements, but the bottom line is that bill is designed to eliminate real estate tax in favor of the uniform states sales tax. And it walks that process through, and it connects an awful lot of the dots to get the task done, where people's houses are not being taken and this perpetual fraud is not constantly year after year being committed.
Let's jump right into the criminal complaint that was filed, and this is a bad boy right here. But before I do that, I want to make super duper clear that you guys understand that this criminal complaint, not only is it filed, but Mitch made it in a way to design it for you as a template. In other words, you guys, if you want to help end property taxes, again, this is not how to protest the value. This is ending property taxes for good. Remember, you can download this template by going to this video's description, and you guys can click any one of these links right here and access that template and start filling out yourself. In addition to that, you guys can go to the
Forward to sworn criminal complaint. To the attention of Mrs. Pamela Bondi, U.S. Attorney General of the United States of America, please take receipt of this sworn criminal complaint testimony and evidence on behalf of the real estate taxpayers of Texas and the citizens of the United States of America. This sworn testimony, including this opening statement, video, spreadsheet, evidence log, audio of this forward and related information, is to be used as the foundation and grounds to stop an incredible wrong that has been committed by elected leaders, state and public officials for many years, which said evidence under law requires criminal prosecution. This sworn complaint shows the pattern and practice of equity stripping property owners, not just in Texas, but across the United States of America. Innocent taxpayers and individuals in Texas and throughout the United States have lost everything they own due to the fraud and corruption that has been allowed to go unchecked and unchallenged by elected leaders and public officials after years of turning their backs on taxpayers and the very laws that govern the state of Texas and all states in the Union. This sworn testimony will be used as a guide to highlight a long list of violations of laws, statutes, and rules pertaining to bond fraud, mail fraud, bank fraud, wire fraud, property tax fraud, and corruption, including but not limited to the use of public funds to procure contracts that are fraudulent and deceptive by design and executed with deliberate intention to defraud taxpayers in Texas. And the same and similar methods of fraudulent contracts is applicable all across the U.S. This sworn testimony is the direct result of thousands of hours of research at considerable expense by myself and individuals directly impacted by the negligence and failure of elected leaders in Texas at all levels of government and law enforcement to uphold the rule of law in the state of Texas. Those efforts led to an initial video to warn the public, which led to several video interviews, which then led to more evidence from across the United States and Canada, and the creation of a library of evidence at mockingbirdproperties.com/DCAD. The more questions that arose, the more research that we did, and the clearer the focus on the pattern and practice of criminality. To our knowledge, this is the first time that the math of USPAP has been tied to the Texas Property Tax Code, to the Texas Education Code 45, to the Texas Constitution, and to the Constitution of the United States of America. The net result of all these efforts is this sworn criminal complaint with the associated evidence, which proves the necessity for criminal prosecution regarding real estate tax fraud, school district bond fraud, and the related school district energy contract fraud that was discovered and documented by Mr. Mashburn, which is being sent to you under a separate criminal complaint. Brief background and history. Elected leaders in Texas have ignored the rule of law and common sense regarding how government is funded in the state of Texas. When the Texas legislature enacted legislation to allow ad valorem taxation on personal property 6 decades ago, it was a very poor choice and the wrong approach to funding government. Over the decades, state leaders have used a Band-Aid approach to try and right the many wrongs with the current system in place, and since its inception, failing to understand or care about interest on debt and debt burdens. Due to the lack of understanding of basic economics, math, and how financial systems work, the leaders of Texas for decades put their greed first and have now put the state of Texas on the brink of a total financial collapse. This is not hyperbole, but is stated fact. School bond debts in many cases now exceed 50% of the home's stated market value. That means a household as deemed by the taxing entity, i.e. school district, which on average is 83% liable for the total of all bonds raised by taxing entities, which owns the Central Appraisal District, CAD, is burdened with not just their usual amortizing mortgage, but also burdened by a second non-amortizing, cumulatively compounding, fraudulently created, non-implicit guaranteed additional mortgage, aka a Ponzi scheme. Of the many problems and issues that we discovered while exposing fraud and corruption, the single most devastating revelation is the outstanding bond debt that has not been retired for decades, but rolled up and rolled out. The financial impact in Texas and the related fallout is worth approximately $650 billion in principal debt and interest that will never be repaid. It is quantifiably impossible for this debt to be repaid because it is impossible to get blood out of a stone, meaning that the median household income is not large enough to cover the average household expenses and mortgage, never mind the additional fraudulent mortgage known as school district bond debt. This criminal behavior is the causation of a giant Ponzi scheme by elected leaders and local taxing entities passing bond packages and projects that are beyond the ability of the taxpayers ever to repay. The Ponzi scheme is made worse by the power of the government demanding payment, or the loss of the asset will occur, and that is RICO. Taxpayers in Texas and every other state do not have enough money to cover the fraudulently created overvaluation, which creates the overtaxation and which leads to many people losing their most valuable asset, being their home. This is equity stripping. It is intentional and criminal. The number of individuals who have lost their homes or in the process is in staggering amounts today, and as this continues, school districts across the United States are pushing out even more bond referenda. Many of these school districts are in direct violation of their state constitutions, and in the case of Texas, far exceed the 25% limitation on bond programs based on the total aggregate value of existing bond debt. This has been going on in Texas for decades and actually promoted by elected leaders and school officials. The Ponzi scheme involves the local taxing entities and the central appraisal districts, CADs, all across the states. CADs are inflating property values to keep the scam going while putting taxpayers in jeopardy of losing their homes. To be 100% crystal clear, there is no nexus between the cost to operate a school district and or municipality and uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, USPAP, which is required by law. The use of predetermined budgets from which market value is determined and an assessed value created is an immediate fraud. The compound cumulative effect of year over year, fraud on fraud, has created an accounting fraud, aka Ponzi scheme, in Texas and across the United States that is many times larger than Enron and WorldCom combined. There cannot be all these violations of law but for intent. formal written complaints were delivered to the Texas State Controller Glenn Hagar at the request of the FBI, TDLR, and TALCB, which were ignored. Every one of these divisions refused to enforce, as they stated in writing, their own regulations, and therefore have broken multiple state and federal laws. USPAP, a requirement under state law, exists to quantify information and to prohibit subjective guessing. Every one of these divisions exists as an illusion of legitimacy and conspire in unison to take real estate taxpayer funds. After realizing the depth of the problem and suffering annual lawsuits created by DCAD and its employees' fraudulent overvaluations, I initially produced a few videos, which over time turned into dozens of videos, all of which are on YouTube, not just to inform the American public of the crimes against them, but to inform the government officials, in that I sent many of those officials emails, formal complaints, used both video and press to outline exactly what was and is transpiring, and in every instance, those officials breaking the laws and refusing to enforce the laws, willingly and with knowledge continue to break both state and federal laws. They know the laws are being violated and they chose to do nothing. Violated Title 42, United States Code, Section 1986, being knowledge of wrongful act and power to prevent. The laws that have been violated include and are not limited to state, civil, and criminal, state constitution, federal, civil, and criminal, and the Constitution of the United States of America. In addition, and as a result of their conspired actions, see criminal conspiracy to defraud.pdf and the who.pdf in the exhibits, the state of Texas has violated its own constitution and the Constitution of the United States of America. The officials, under color of law, steal more money by overvaluation and resulting overtaxation to cover their crimes, and if you don't pay, they take your property. This conforms to every requirement of RICO, including crossing state lines. Either the law exists or it does not. Any person who signed an oath of office, including but not limited to school superintendents, school district boards, chief appraisers, central appraisal district boards, district attorneys, lawyers, legislators, or judges who refuse to enforce the black letter of the law should be removed from their positions, disbarred and or impeached and sued for damages. In the case of the chief appraisers, school district superintendents, their lawyers, and the outside accounting firms that shirk audit requirements with the "we just look at what we were given" are aiding and abetting a criminal conspiracy to defraud should be jailed under RICO. Pay us the money or we will take the house. Get a second job and pay your taxes. We are DCAD and the public has only to trust us. In other words, this cast of criminals believe they answer to no one. Any sale of securities without a modicum of due diligence at the selling entity wherein the value of the bond is predicated on a fraud places liability unto the bond underwriter and those selling the bonds. Who are the bondholders? Pension funds and 401k owners. Who are they? Mom and pop. Therefore, not only is the equity being stripped from their largest assets, the value of their pensions and 401ks are being rendered de minimis as the bond values are predicated on a fraud. Any vote and violation of the law to continue knowingly with intent perpetuate fraud makes the person voting for ignoring the law a fraudster and further subverts the black letter of the law. Prohibiting the discovery of fraud makes those who are prohibiting the discovery of fraud, including judges who opine to politics and not the law, aiding and abetting a criminal conspiracy to commit fraud. If the law does not exist for the protection of the citizens, then there is no reason to pay real estate taxes. The only thing that matters is the median household income from which the true math of finance must be derived. Leverage for the sake of fraud must be eliminated. Thus, aside from the necessary criminal prosecution, repeal the real estate tax in favor of the uniform state sales tax and restore the balance sheet to mom and pop by allowing them to own the asset beneath their feet. The Department of Justice must do its job to tip the scales of justice back into the hands of mom and pop and away from the criminals and their co-conspirators. We will show the DOJ exactly how this is a $1 trillion plus issue to the U.S. economy. This sworn testimony will walk the DOJ through what laws are being broken and the road of how they are being violated, along with who is responsible. There is a massive amount of evidence, including the government's own documents. In addition to this video, we are providing the DOJ with a spreadsheet list of the evidence that corresponds to the exhibits mentioned in the video. Each exhibit has a link to the full document, and in addition, those documents are on mockingbirdproperties.com/DCAD and commonsenslaw.org. All the evidence points to the laws existing but not being enforced by any member in the chain of authority, starting with the chief appraisers and ending with Glenn Hagar, the Texas state controller, all of which is a violation of the law at its core, as well as the rule of law, for which solution is the federal criminal prosecution by the DOJ and the SEC of those responsible parties of authority who have sworn an oath of office to protect and defend the Texas Constitution and the Constitution of the United States of America. It is the fraud itself that has made housing unaffordable. It is the fraud that has put 30% plus of the households in harm's way of bankruptcy or losing the roof over their head. It is the cumulative compounding of the fraud that has caused roughly $5 trillion in bond fraud. It is the school district fraud taxing entities and their owned central appraisal districts that has caused many homes to have school bond debt of 50% over the deemed home value, thus making the homeowners potentially responsible for 2 mortgages, one of which was never agreed to. What black letter of the law exists to strip equity from property owners across the United States? In trying times like these, great leaders arise to fill the void of ignorance and financial chicanery left behind by the fraudsters who have been discovered. None of what you are about to see has anything to do with politics, but has everything to do with math, the rule of law, and the black letter of the law. This sworn video testimony, opening statement, along with the criminal complaint, signed video transcript, and exhibits are integral and form the basis of requested prosecution of those who conspired and continue to conspire to defraud the property owners and thus the American public by Mitchell Wexler, President GP, Mavex Shops of Flower Mound, LLC, 1913 Jewton Road, Suite 117, Flower Mound, Texas 75028, mockingbirdproperties.com/DCAD, Mitch at mockingbirdprop.com, date March 4th, 2025. That's the piece, y'all. Ah, yes. We do need complete abolition of property taxes. Not even going to lie, we absolutely do. Check this out, my friends. I just got a Judge.me review from Kay for the Aloe and Cucumber Serene Gel Cleanser at tulipblooms.shop. So get your hands on that. And just as a reminder, we are doing a body butter blowout due to temperature changes in the summer. We're not going to be shipping body butter past April. That's just how it's going to be. I know that's a disappointment to some. And I know that those of you who have been thinking about getting your hands on body butter, we're just not doing it anymore. We're gonna stop shipping during Houston's ridiculously hot summer, because all it does is melt the body butter, and then when it solidifies again at room temperature, all the different butters solidify at different temperatures. Now, we could fix that by adding cetyl alcohol, which is a special kind of wax, but then that defeats the entire purpose of being an all-natural company. So get your body butter now at tulipblooms.shop. Promo code Shapiro for 10% off. Promo code Shapiro gets you 10% off, and it also tells you that tells me that you're reading Epic Threads fans. The body butter is absolutely amazing, guys. When it's in its right form. We do see. Okay, this one right here. Oh, that's not the one. Oh, that smells wonderful. That's my Happy Hippie. This is the this one is the Happy Hippie, and this one is the what? This one is. Oh, it's simply lavender. There we go. Okay, so this is my lavender one. The unscented. I have Happy Hippie and lavender here, but my point is this: I can teach you how to fix the body butter if it gets melted and then resolidifies. It's just not a scalable solution. You have to take it. You have to put it in the oven at 150 degrees and just wait for 15 minutes for it to truly liquefy. Then take it, which should be pretty hot to the touch, so be careful. Take it directly from there and put it in the freezer for like 15 minutes. Ideally, what you would also do is take one of those little milk frothers that you get for espresso and bust it in there to give it a good solid whipping. And then you've got the body butter back in its perfect form. Is that really worth it? I could do it, no problem. but I don't want my customers to have to do that shit. That's ridiculous. So anyway, that's why we're stopping. So now is the time. What we do is we take the body butter, we wrap it in thermal wrapping, and we try to make it so that it is exposed to the outside air, to the outside weather as much as possible. However, once we hit Houston summer, there's just literally hell's front porch here in Houston. So it's not worth it. Anyway, so take advantage now. Get your hands on the Epic Moisture Creamy Body Butter. It is the best body butter in the world. I will testify right now. There's nothing like it. It is body butter, but it soaks in like a friggin' like a lotion. I put it on my face whenever I want. I don't have to worry about anything. Anyway, I think you guys are just fabulous. Do me a favor and share this material. I am independent now. I go on other shows, but I am really, really redoubling my efforts here at Reading Epic Threads to expand my platform. So if you can, retweet this, send it all out there, do the things, and, rock and roll, right? I love you all. Thank you so much for being here. And let's go ahead and pray. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. I love you all. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you tomorrow.
I will be the greatest president that God ever